Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back, way back, to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, where golden light dances on temple walls and everyone calls you Living Horus. Sounds glamorous, right? You're the Pharaoh, god king of Egypt, master of two lands. But wait, there's no air conditioning, no sunglasses, and definitely no cold lemonade. You're wearing 30 pounds of embroidered linen in the blazing desert sun, with sacred beetles embroidered onto your socks. You sit on a gold-covered throne that absorbs heat like a frying pan. And that crowd of priests chanting your praises, they're also watching to see if you so much as sneeze wrong. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it over there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up not when you want to, but when the temple schedule demands it. Dawn isn't just a sunrise, it's a royal obligation. The priests barge in with incense, rattles, and bowls of sacred oil, and before your eyelids are even fully open, you're halfway into a ritual bath. The water's scented with lotus, sure, but also, it's cold. And you're still half asleep, swaying in front of a dozen watching attendants who are terrified to make eye contact, because technically, you are a god. The morning starts with hymns to the sun god Ra, whom you're supposed to embody. That's a lot of pressure. If it's cloudy today, you must not be in harmony with the divine. If there's a solar eclipse, you'll spend the next week apologizing to crocodile-shaped deities through ritual fasting. Then comes the sacred wardrobe, layers upon layers of heavy linen, fine jewelry, leopard skin sashes, a falcon-headed pectoral that digs into your clavicle, and a headdress that traps more heat than a clay oven. And you can't wear sandals like a normal person. Yours are embroidered with images of your enemies, so that with every step, you symbolically conquer chaos. It sounds poetic, but mostly it just makes your feet sweat. Now imagine all this happening while the temperature creeps past 100 degrees F. You're not allowed to sweat openly, too mortal. You can't complain, gods don't whine. You must sit still through hours of ceremonies, stoic as a statue while priests sprinkle natron salt and chant your titles, which include things like Lord of the Sun Disk and Bull of his mother. No one really knows what that one means, but they all pretend it's very flattering. Outside, peasants squint up at the sun and pray you keep the floods coming. You glance nervously at the Nile from your shaded pavilion. If the waters don't rise, you're not just a bad ruler, you're cosmically out of balance. And that means another festival, more offerings, and yet another goat that really didn't sign up for this. Historians still argue whether the pharaohs genuinely believed they were divine or just went along with the theater to keep the system working. Either way, you can't exactly call in sick from being the sun god's vessel. You might think a palace would offer some relief. And yes, it has columns and murals and maybe even a cool breeze near the lotus pool. But there's also the constant presence of scribes, guards, servants, and advisors. The moment you sit, someone reads the crop reports. Another guy brings in dreams people had about you. A priest nervously reports that a falcon landed on the wrong obelisk this morning, which might mean famine, or might mean you forgot to thank the ibis god last Thursday. By midday, you're melting under layers of ceremony and still haven't eaten. Not that it matters. Meals are formal too. You can't just chew. You must ritually consume symbolic offerings while maintaining perfect posture. If you drop a fig, it's not just clumsiness. It might be interpreted as a bad omen for the southern provinces. And there's no escaping the public eye. Even sleeping is considered a sacred state, watched over by priests who interpret your dreams and occasionally make you wake up to bless a statue or chant something in a very ancient dialect that no one quite understands anymore. Even recreation comes with rules. Hunting? You do it not for sport, but to symbolically conquer chaos again. Fishing? Still symbolic. Boating? You're reenacting Ra's voyage through the underworld. You can't just enjoy the Nile breeze like a normal mortal. Everything you do, from blinking to breathing, is wrapped in layers of meaning, tradition, and expectation. Quirky fact, some pharaohs actually employed professional listeners, whose sole job was to agree with you gently all day. That sounds comforting, but also exhausting. Imagine someone whispering, "Brilliant point, my lord of Maat," every time you wonder aloud whether cats dream in hieroglyphs. And let's talk about cats for a second. Sure, they're sacred, but they also walk across your scrolls, knock over incense bowls, and occasionally bite high-ranking priests. Still, you must pretend it's all part of divine will. After all, Bastet demands respect, even when her earthly avatars are shredding your sandals. So you, radiant embodiment of balance and order, ruler of the two lands, master of time, are mostly just trying not to fall asleep during yet another ceremonial incense offering while a line of courtiers mumbles increasingly awkward poetry about your eyebrows. And even as the sun finally dips and the light turns golden over the lotus ponds, your work is not done. Twilight rituals begin, prayers to guide the sun safely through the underworld. You must be present for each one, because if you skip it, well, the sun might not rise tomorrow, and you don't want that on your royal conscience. You slip off your sandals, finally, but the symbols of power remain: heavy jewelry, divine scent, a crown that's really just a fancy helmet. You try to lie back on your carved wooden bed, which looks impressive in paintings but feels like it was designed by someone who'd never actually slept. As you close your eyes, you whisper a silent apology to the god of dreams in case you accidentally think something undivine while dozing off. And just before sleep claims you, there's a knock at the door. The high priest needs you to approve a new hymn about your toenails. Being a god king, as it turns out, is mostly just a very sweaty full-time job with no bathroom breaks. You're the most powerful person in Egypt, possibly on Earth, or so the scrolls say. But here's something the temple murals forget to mention: the royal bladder dilemma. You sit on a golden throne, rule over two kingdoms, command armies, and speak with the gods. Yet when nature calls, there's no such thing as privacy, not when you're the pharaoh. Let's paint the scene. You're in the middle of a long, rhythmic ritual inside the temple of Karnak. Incense thick as soup, chanting that seems to go on forever. You've had a ceremonial drink, something fermented and honeyed, of course, and eaten a handful of ritual dates. Now you feel it. The slow, unmistakable pressure. But the priests are mid-recital, and you, divine vessel of Horus, must not interrupt. And so, you sit. The royal protocol doesn't include a subtle hand raise and a quick exit. You can't whisper "back in 5" and dash behind a pillar. You must wait until the entire sequence ends. Maybe that's 10 minutes, maybe an hour. Depends on the positioning of the stars and how enthusiastic the high priest is feeling. Now, historians still argue whether pharaohs had some sort of chamber pot protocol, perhaps hidden behind curtains, or with a discreet gold-inlaid bowl carried by a very unlucky servant. Some records suggest this might have been the case, though details are sparse and, understandably, not immortalized in stone. But based on the size of your ceremonial robes and the number of people always within earshot, even sneaking a relief moment is a Herculean task. And it gets more complicated. You're not only supposed to maintain dignity at all times, you are dignity incarnate. Bodily functions, however natural, don't exactly scream eternal order. That means your daily routines are governed by layers of etiquette, observation, and scheduling. You'd think your palace, your own home, might offer some relief. And sure, the inner chambers are quieter, the walls painted with soft golds, blues, and symbolic lotuses. But there are still attendants, always waiting, always listening. Even when you're simply trying to wash your hands, someone's noting whether you used the scented oils in the correct ritual order. Left hand, then right. Lotus before papyrus. Honestly, even your modern toothbrush feels rebellious compared to their 10-minute reed bristle scrubbing ceremony. Now, picture traveling across the kingdom. You're on a royal barge drifting down the Nile. The breeze is nice. The river sparkles. Crocodiles keep their respectful distance, probably because the high priest promised you'd turn into a lightning bolt if disrespected. But then you realize, the next temple stop is 3 hours away, and there are no stops in between. You are, once again, trapped with your bladder and a flotilla of musicians, scribes, and nervous officials all staring at you for divine reassurance that the papyrus tax won't increase this year. A fringe detail. In some tomb paintings, we see small side rooms next to the pharaoh's audience halls. Some Egyptologists believe these might have functioned as primitive privy spaces, basically the royal equivalent of a back room with a chamber pot. But again, no concrete evidence. No one carved bathroom hieroglyphs above the door. Instead, what we do have is an obsession with cleansing. Ritual purity. You, as Pharaoh, must be clean not just physically, but spiritually. That means multiple daily baths in perfumed water, scrubbings with natron salt, and incense fumigations so intense your eyebrows singe. You're expected to smell divine, look divine, and never, ever sweat or stink like a mortal. It's exhausting, and it makes something like using the toilet an awkward theological gray area. Remember that elaborate headdress from earlier? Try removing it gracefully in an emergency. It weighs about 6 pounds, is strapped under your chin with a woven tie, and if you knock it sideways, someone might interpret it as a bad omen for barley production. You've probably figured out by now that pharaohs didn't travel alone. Every journey was a procession. Every walk through the palace, a parade. Even if you wanted to sneak off for a private moment, you'd have to get past 3 fan bearers, 2 incense boys, a scribe, a high priest, and a small white cat whose job remains unclear but is probably divine. Light joke incoming. If you did manage to sneak off, there's a non-zero chance someone would carve that moment into a wall a century later as the Great Retreat of Year 17. But in all seriousness, being the pharaoh meant sacrificing personal comfort for public performance. You were a symbol of order, the axis of the universe. There was no room for complaining, no casual chats. Every word mattered. Every gesture was ceremonial. Even eating was a rehearsed display of divine abundance, which meant digestive consequences were never far behind. Let's talk papyrus scrolls for a moment. Not the ones with sacred hymns or military decrees, the other ones. Yes, the medical scrolls, like the Ebers Papyrus. This charming document lists more than 700 magical and practical remedies for ailments. It includes treatments for urinary trouble, involving ground carob pods, mashed dates, and prayer. Was this prescribed for pharaohs? Possibly, but did it work? Historians still argue whether these remedies were effective or mostly symbolic gestures meant to appease both gods and the gut. And if all else failed, you could always consult the dream interpreters. Dreamed of a leaky jar? Bad sign. Dreamed of a fish flopping in a pond? Could mean kidney trouble or war with Nubia. Honestly, half the time no one knew for sure. They just scribbled it down and hoped for the best. You'd think with all this divinity surrounding you, someone would invent indoor plumbing. Alas, no. Not in your reign. Not for another couple thousand years. The best you get is a clay pot behind a curtain, and even that feels like breaking sacred protocol. So here you are. Master of Upper and Lower Egypt. Wearer of the double crown. The living embodiment of Ma'at, the goddess of balance. But also, very much a person. And being a person, especially a person who drank too much honeyed beer at the festival of Hathor, comes with inevitable biological needs. And the worst part? You can't laugh about it. Not publicly. The scribe would write it down. The high priest would frown, and somewhere, someone would declare that the gods were displeased because Pharaoh chuckled at his own hiccup. So instead, you sit, you smile, you endure, because that's what gods trapped in human bodies do. You'd think one of the perks of being a pharaoh would be picking your own name, right? Something cool, something powerful, like Flame of the Falcon or Destroyer of Taxes. But no, your name isn't just a name, it's a spell, a symbol, a cosmic resume, and you don't get to choose it entirely. In fact, you get 5 of them. That's right, 5 royal names, and if even one is slightly off, some priest will claim the stars are misaligned and the hippos will stop mating, which, historically, is very bad for Egypt. Let's break it down. Every pharaoh is given a set of names upon coronation, each tied to a specific aspect of the divine order. There's the Horus name, the Nebti name, that's two ladies for those keeping track, the Golden Horus name, the throne name, and the birth name. Each one comes with titles like Mighty Bull Appearing in Truth or Protector of the Two Lands. Try fitting that on a business card. And these aren't just ceremonial. These names appear on everything. Obelisks, temples, official decrees, even tombs. If one is missing, miswritten, or forgotten, it's not just a typo, it's a metaphysical disaster. Your soul might not find its way to the afterlife. Your divine essence could vanish. Your sandals might even lose their symbolic power to trample chaos. Okay, maybe not the sandals, but you get the idea. Historians still argue whether these names reflected actual policy or were just religious formalities. Some say the throne name might hint at a ruler's priorities, like a king emphasizing justice and rebirth may have been trying to undo his father's unpopular grain tax. Others think the names were more like a divine checklist. Make sure you're aligned with Horus, the vulture goddess Nekbet, and gold, all in one breath. But imagine the pressure. Your coronation isn't just a celebration, it's a branding exercise that could decide your cosmic fate. Priests and scribes gather around, debating for weeks what your Horus name should be. Bringer of light sounds nice, but what if there's a drought? Stability of the two lands sounds safe, until someone spills beer on a crocodile statue during the festival and all bets are off. Quirky fact? Some pharaohs straight up reused names. Ramses the Great? Technically Ramses X. There were at least 11 more. It's like ancient Egyptian royalty was stuck in a very glittery version of a family group chat. Ramses the Younger accidentally replies to a temple memo meant for Ramses VII, and now the barley harvest is getting blessed twice. And that's not even counting Hatshepsut, who had to rebrand herself entirely to be accepted as pharaoh. She styled herself with male pronouns and the traditional beard just to fit the cosmic mold, though her name still included references to Ma'at, the goddess of truth. And even she had to tread carefully. One bad translation of her name, and the priesthood might have claimed the heavens would collapse into jellyfish. Now your name also affects how you're remembered. Pharaohs who fell out of favor were literally scratched out of history. Chiseled off monuments, erased from cartouches. Poof, gone. As if you never existed. And in Egyptian theology, being forgotten was worse than death. If no one remembers your name, your soul wanders, lost. No bark, no feast, no eternal sleep. Just lonely drift through the cosmic sands. Forever. Which makes every syllable matter. You can't just say, I'm King Bob of Memphis, and call it a day. You need your cartouches, those oval shapes enclosing your royal names, to be perfectly carved, ideally on every visible surface within a 10-mile radius. That way, when you eventually die and your soul takes the scenic route through the underworld, Anubis can look at the walls and say, ah, yes, that guy. Speaking of cartouches, did you know some tourists in the 19th century carved their own names into them? Imagine being an eternal god king of the Nile, only to be upstaged by Thomas from Lancashire, 1837, scribbled next to your sacred falcon glyph. Now there's another twist. You're no way. It's just naming yourself for this life. You're naming yourself for the next one too. Your tomb, your afterlife identity, your prayers. It all ties back to your names. Say the wrong one, and the ritual doesn't work. A missing cartouche in your burial chamber? That could unravel your entire resurrection plan like a badly wrapped mummy. So, yes, being pharaoh is a full-time job, and branding is half of it. You have to be divinely named, properly carved, ritually invoked, and universally remembered. Otherwise, your soul gets the equivalent of being left on red by the gods. Let's imagine it in today's terms. You're at your own coronation. The sun is blazing. Priests are painting your face with sacred ochre. Trumpets are playing. You smile, ready to announce your name. And then some temple scribe interrupts. Actually, O Radiant One, we've just received word from the Temple of Thoth. Turns out he who reigns like papyrus is already taken. We'll need to go with Bringer of Order to the Lotus Marsh instead. It's like having to reprint your entire resume during the job interview. And that's not the worst part. Even after you die, people can still edit your name. Later dynasties might adopt your titles, modify them, or attach unflattering nicknames like "he who built a lot but didn't finish much," and they'll do it with a chisel. So as you sit on your high-backed golden throne, wearing your glued-on beard and waiting for your afternoon ceremony to begin, you silently rehearse your 5 names. You remind yourself which one gets read at which ritual. You try not to panic when you realize the scribe just pronounced Nebti with a long vowel. Because being Pharaoh means never just being you. You're Horus on earth, son of Ra, beloved of Ma'at, lord of the 5 names. And if you forget one, well, there's always the crocodile god Sobek, patiently waiting in the afterlife with a clipboard and a very judgmental stare. It's nighttime at the palace. The sky above Thebes is a swirl of deep indigo and flickering stars, the kind that seem close enough to pluck like dates from a tree. You finally finish the day's rituals, hearings, blessings, ceremonial goose releasing, and 2 full hours of pretending not to notice your vizier side-eyeing you during the barley inspection. You shuffle into your royal bedchamber, dreaming of rest. But rest is relative when your bed feels like it was carved from leftover temple stones and your pillow is a block of painted wood. See, being Pharaoh might mean limitless power, but it also means sleeping in what modern mortals would probably call an orthopedic nightmare. Royal beds were often elaborately inlaid with ebony, ivory, and gold leaf. Yes, beautiful. Yes, symbolic. But also stiff as a parade chariot. No plush mattress, no linen-stuffed feather topper. Just a sleek, cold slab with decorative footboards shaped like lotus blossoms and lions, presumably to scare off dream demons, or possibly just your in-laws. And don't get too cozy. You're never really alone. Your bedchamber might be private, but nearby are servants, guards, record keepers, and priests. Someone's always listening in case you mumble divine wisdom in your sleep, or snore like a sacred ibis, which, by the way, is not flattering. Let's say you do fall asleep. You'd hope for a peaceful night, right? Wrong. Dreams for a pharaoh are political events. The gods speak through them, or at least that's what everyone insists. Dream interpreters keep clay tablets and scrolls ready to decode even the vaguest dream symbols. Dreamed of a fish? Might mean an invasion. Dreamed of eating figs? A rival priest might be plotting against you. Dreamed of falling into a well? Definitely a tax revolt. And heaven help you if you sleepwalk. That might be interpreted as a sign from Thoth that your Bartse is supposed to start a new calendar. Historians still debate whether pharaohs actually believed their beds had magical protective properties, or whether it was mostly ritual theater. Either way, your sleeping space isn't a place to sprawl and drool. It's more like a highly curated stage for nightly communication with the divine. Every object in your room serves a purpose. A tiny scarab carved into the bedpost guards your heart. A painted goddess watches over your dreams. A bowl of natron by the door wards off evil spirits, unless, of course, it was swapped out by a disgruntled cousin. It's always the cousins. Now let's talk posture. Ancient Egyptians prized straight spines, so your royal sleeping position probably resembled that of a very focused statue. You lie on your side, arms gently folded, one knee slightly bent. Wiggle too much, and someone will think you're reenacting the serpent god Apophis's nightly battle with the sunbark. Not recommended. And here's the kicker. Your magnificent royal headdress comes off at night, but your jewelry? Often that stays on. Necklaces shaped like solar discs and crocodile teeth rest against your collarbone for protection. Anklets jingle softly with sacred bells. You're basically sleeping in a full access pass to the afterlife. Now, you'd think the discomfort would stop at bedtime, but no. Royal back pain is practically a divine tradition. These thrones of state are designed to impress, not support. They have armrests carved like falcons and cushions stuffed with reeds. Yes, reeds, as in the stuff growing in the Nile marshes. Your spine learns the shape of a river bend. After 30 minutes of holding court, your shoulders throb. After 2 hours, you're ready to trade all of Lower Egypt for a decent footstool. A quirky discovery? Some pharaohs actually had portable headrests, small curved structures placed under the neck while sleeping, meant to align your head just right and prevent evil spirits from entering your ears while you dream. Helpful? Perhaps. Comfortable? Think balancing your head on a piece of driftwood while pretending it's healing your soul. By now you may be wondering, did pharaohs ever enjoy lying down? Occasionally, yes. During feasts, there were lounging couches, more sloped than flat, designed for reclining while servants fanned you and harpists played odes to your magnificence. But even these moments came with performance. You don't simply relax, you must relax like a god. A deity does not burp. A deity does not nap mid-ceremony. A deity definitely does not get caught scratching an itch in front of the wine steward. Which brings us to the concept of royal leisure. It existed in theory, but in practice, leisure was always loaded. Taking a bath wasn't just for hygiene, it was a purification ritual with 27 steps and an audience. Playing a board game like Senet might sound like fun, but half the time, you're supposed to be symbolically navigating the underworld, and losing to your younger brother is probably a political crisis. Historians still argue whether some pharaohs found ways to escape the pressure. Akhenaten, for example, famously moved the capital to Amarna and simplified religious rituals, but even he couldn't escape the need to appear divinely serene while managing rebellions and heat stroke. And don't get us started on poor Tutankhamun, who inherited a religious mess, a throne too big for his teenage legs, and probably a very stiff mattress. So here you are, trying to drift off. You've been rubbed with sacred oils that smell vaguely like burned honey and swamp flowers. A priest outside your chamber is softly chanting a lullaby to Osiris, and you can still hear the squeak of papyrus sandals from a scribe pacing back and forth, probably debating whether your dream about a dancing baboon means economic prosperity or an omen of doom. You lie there, blinking up at the painted stars on your ceiling, wondering if you'll ever have a dream that doesn't require an emergency council meeting. Your lower back aches, your headrest feels like a decorative fruit bowl, and somewhere, a temple cat has chosen your foot as its midnight perch. But you must stay still. You must look serene. Even in your dreams, you are watched. Because you're not just a person, you're the pivot of the cosmos. And as it turns out, the cosmos doesn't come with memory foam. Morning again. The sun rises over the Nile in a sheet of gold. Ibis birds flap lazily across the water, and your eyelids creak open just in time for another day of divine responsibility. You stretch, not too dramatically, of course. No one wants to see the son of Ra yawn like a bored donkey, and prepare for the ceremonial breakfast, hoping it won't involve any more dates shaped like deities. But as you step into the open courtyard, a new anxiety arrives: crocodiles and court politics. You, dear Pharaoh, are surrounded on all sides by priests with waxy smiles, nobles with mysterious bruises, generals who claim to love you more than their own sandals. But let's not forget the Nile, glistening innocently nearby. Crocodiles lurk beneath the surface. They're sacred in some temples, demonized in others, and always, always hungry. You've issued laws about not feeding them near the palace. The peasants ignored you. Because sometimes it's better to risk divine punishment than anger a hungry reptile. And so, even as you attend to the sacred rituals of mourning, purification, incense, a tedious blessing over the grain stores, you can't help but notice the guards eyeing the water with their spears twitching. A noble's pet monkey went missing last week, and everyone's blaming the crocodiles. Well, almost everyone. One palace cook swears it was the high priest's doing. "Too many omens," she muttered. You smile politely, because the real danger isn't in the Nile, it's at court. Your vizier is at your elbow, murmuring in that slow, syrupy voice that makes you want to pour wax in your ears. Great one, Radiance of Ra, we should discuss the tribute from Nubia, which is court speak for, I'm going to suggest something inoffensive while plotting to replace your chariot driver with my cousin. Court life is a chessboard, and you're the king, but not always the player. Behind your ceremonial fan-bearers, alliances shift like desert sand. That noble who promised you loyalty last festival, he's now offering grain contracts to your half-sister's husband. The priest who swore he'd cleanse your name in every temple, he's scribbling new prophecies that oddly seem to favor his nephew's ascension to high scribe. And the worst part? You can't accuse anyone, not directly, because that would show weakness. You're the unshakable heart of Me'at. The world turns because you command it. You can't very well pull someone aside and whisper, "Hey, did you try to poison my pomegranate last night?" You must smile. You must glide. You must play three-dimensional political senate with people who've been training since infancy to smile while sharpening knives. Metaphorically, of course. Probably. Historians still argue whether pharaohs actually feared coups or just played along with the palace games for the sake of tradition. Some rulers like Thutmose III clearly thrived in the political arena. Heirs, like Akhenaten, fled it entirely, building new capitals and ignoring everyone. But for you, it's a daily drama you can't escape. Now back to the crocodiles. Sobek, the crocodile-headed god, is supposed to protect you from chaos, which is hilarious, given that actual crocodiles seem determined to keep your stress levels high. You hear reports weekly. A servant devoured near Memphis, a tax collector's donkey dragged underwater in Fayum. You issue more protective amulets. You order prayers to Sobek. But still, those yellow eyes surface and blink, as if to say, keep trying. Meanwhile, court banquets become theater. You're seated on a raised dais, gold and lapis glinting from every corner. Everyone toasts your wisdom, your strength, your uncanny ability to appear freshly oiled at all times. But no one's drinking the wine unless their personal taster tries it first. You watch the high priest pass his goblet to an assistant with a gentle cough. The assistant drinks, waits, and smiles. The priest takes a tiny sip, then glances at you like he's just solved divine algebra. The food is ornate, duck with lotus glaze, figs stuffed with almond paste, fish arranged in the shape of sacred symbols. You barely touch it. The last time you indulged too freely, you spent 2 days in a steam room with a priest chanting relaxation spells while a servant waved hot reeds near your feet. The spells didn't help. You look across the room. Your cousin, the one with the convenient diplomatic marriage to a rival kingdom, is laughing too loudly. What was that about? And why does your chariot driver suddenly smell like imported myrrh? Who gave him that? You excuse yourself with divine poise. Later, during the formal reading of omens, a hawk flies in the wrong direction. The priests nod seriously. One scratches something into a scroll. "O Most High, perhaps we delay the grain shipment until the stars realign." You blink. You'd been planning on that shipment for weeks. But if you contradict him, chaos, cosmic imbalance, bad wheat energy. And so, you nod. Quirky side note, some pharaohs kept court dwarfs and pet baboons, not just for amusement, but for protection. They were seen as magically attuned, capable of spotting hidden danger. You've got one too. He's perched near the back, feeding your ibis a date. He hasn't blinked in 10 minutes. You feel safer already. But let's not forget the real danger. Paperwork. Endless scrolls written in increasingly florid hieroglyphs. Grain tallies, tax decrees, dream reports, lists of new temple socks, all delivered daily to your scribe for approval. Miss one? It could offend the provincial governor of Elephantine. Sign it too quickly? You might accidentally approve a statue of your least favorite cousin being built next to your favorite temple. Historians have found detailed records of such decrees, including one where a pharaoh banned onion theft with a fine of 7 copper rings. Why 7? No one knows. Maybe the onions were divine, maybe the rings were symbolic, or maybe, like you, the pharaoh just wanted the scribes to stop talking. You finish the day with another audience. A general brings news from the front. "We have defeated the sea peoples," he declares. "They have offered tribute." You nod solemnly while mentally asking, "Who are the sea peoples again?" You'll find out in tomorrow's scrolls. At last, you retreat to your chambers. You glance at the water, where a pair of yellow eyes slip quietly beneath the surface. You sigh. At least the crocodiles don't pretend to be your friend. In your palace, among sacred flowers and silent corridors, you realize the truth. Ruling Egypt isn't about commanding armies or communing with gods. It's about surviving your own inner circle. It's festival day again, one of roughly 200 such days on the ancient Egyptian calendar. The courtyard smells of myrrh, sandalwood, and whatever the priests were fermenting in that enormous gold bowl. You've just endured 3 hours of blessings, hymn recitals, and one awkward moment when someone dropped a papyrus scroll mid-prayer. But now comes the part where you must truly become divine. You put on the beard. No, not your beard. The ceremonial beard. The fake one. Strapped to your chin with cord and beeswax paste. It's a symbol of divine rulership, modeled after Osiris himself, who, fun fact, was the first mummy and apparently very into facial hair. The tradition says pharaohs must appear ageless, wise, and above all, godlike, and nothing screams, "I am cosmic order personified," like a long, thin, slightly scratchy plait dangling from your jaw. But here's the problem. The thing itches. And it doesn't move with your face. It bounces with every syllable like a tiny pendulum of power. You're giving a speech at the great temple of Amun, praising the rising floodwaters and your ancestors, and the whole time you're resisting the urge to swat at your own chin like a mildly annoyed baboon. Historians still argue whether the ceremonial beard had deep religious meaning or was simply a fashion standard enforced by priests who enjoyed making rulers suffer. Theories vary. Some say it enhanced the pharaoh's link to Osiris, god of the afterlife. Others think it was a signal of timeless masculinity, an eternal marker of rule. But one fringe theory suggests the glued-on beards may have started as a theatrical joke and just got stuck, literally and culturally. Either way, you can't skip it. Even Hatshepsut, a female pharaoh who ruled brilliantly, had to strap one on. Artistic depictions of her always include the false beard, square in shape, declaring, "Yes, I rule this land, and no, I don't care that my chin itches." It's a beard of necessity, of cosmic symbolism, and also, probably, of jaw fatigue. You catch your reflection in a burnished copper mirror. The eyes of Horus are painted beneath your brow. Your collar gleams with lapis and gold. The beard hangs straight and solemn. You look like a cross between a lion statue and someone pretending to enjoy a fancy wedding reception. And then the heat hits. Because it's 102 degrees in the shade, and that beard is waxed in place. Sweat pools under the cord. You feel it trickle down your neck. You glance sideways at the high priest. He's wearing linen, shaded under a fan, looking smugly cool. Meanwhile, you are slowly melting like a sacred candle. The rest of your ensemble doesn't help. The Neem's headdress wraps your skull like a well-meaning turban designed by an overzealous cobra. Your pectoral weighs roughly the same as a large house cat. Your belt is cinched so tightly, divine breath might be more of a memory than a reality. Still, you march forward. A row of children tosses flower petals in your path. They chant your 5 royal names with the rhythm of a very confident drumbeat. A priest sprinkles holy water near your feet. Someone blows a conch shell that sounds like a startled duck. And through it all, the beard wobbles. Now comes the dancing. No, not you. You're a god, not a showman. But you must observe the festival of Opet, where dancers from all corners of Egypt gather to perform before your throne. You sit motionless, beard rigid, nodding solemnly at each performance. Some dances represent the balance of the cosmos. Others seem to involve balancing jugs of date wine on heads, which you suspect may have been added for flair. Quirky detail. Ancient sources mention festival clowns, people in masks who performed comic routines to lighten the mood. You're not sure whether they're mocking you, the gods, or just the concept of ritual itself, but their chicken masks and exaggerated papyrus wigs are oddly effective. Yo, you do not laugh, at least not out loud. Suddenly, your chin twitches. The beard slips. A slight tilt, barely noticeable, but your heart lurches. Is this an omen? A divine warning? Will a hawk land backwards again? Or is it just glue failure? You glance at the priest. He glances back. You share a single, horrified moment of mutual awareness. Then he bows. Oh, brilliant one, this is surely a sign of joy. Crisis averted. Of course, the rituals continue. This is the part where you must touch the sacred crook and flail, symbols of kingship that double as surprisingly sharp accessories. You raise them, pose for the artists, try not to blink while someone scratches your likeness into limestone. The beard bobs as you hold your arms up. Your shoulders ache. The crowd roars with admiration. You exhale. Finally, after 6 hours of being seen, praised, perfumed, and paraded, you're allowed to retreat, sort of. You shuffle toward the inner chambers of the temple, trailed by 4 scribes, 2 bearers, and a man whose only job is to carry the fan in case you say, "Now." You remove the beard, very carefully. The wax sticks to your skin, you wince. A little yelp escapes, but you muffle it with a cough. You hand the beard to your servant, who places it reverently in a cedarwood case carved with protective symbols. It's stored in a sacred chamber next to other ceremonial regalia, robes, headdresses, necklaces shaped like ankhs and scarabs. You finally sit. You rub your jaw. You groan softly, then remember to mutter a blessing to Thoth for speech unburdened by artifice. It's one of the many small sacrifices of rulership. Your body, your privacy, your facial comfort. You must look eternal. You must sound wise. And if the gods demand an itchy square braid on your chin, you nod and obey. Because deep down, you know this. One slip, one misstep, one beard gone askew, and some rival noble will whisper, "Did you see? The living Horus can't even keep his beard straight." You're finally starting to get the hang of it, sort of. The robes no longer feel like linen anvils. You've developed a polite nod for when the priests ramble, and your ceremonial beard, while still absurdly uncomfortable, now only leaves a mild red patch instead of a full chin rash. But just as you're beginning to feel like the living god you're supposed to be, someone reminds you of an unfortunate fact. You're probably going to die young, and even worse, you still have homework. Let's say you're Tutankhamun, the so-called boy king, crowned at 9, dead by 19. You never even got to legally drink beer in some provinces. Your knees barely reached the footrest of your own throne, and yet you were expected to rule the most powerful civilization in the world, commune with gods, manage a priesthood of thousands, and pick your royal iconography wisely, lotus motif or papyrus motif. One symbolizes rebirth, the other symbolizes swamp plants. Choose carefully. While your peers are playing with clay hippos, you're approving grain distribution plans and making divine proclamations about Nile irrigation. And your tutors? Not gentle mentors, but relentless overseers who wake you up before dawn to recite temple hymns and teach you the 37 different meanings of the word Ka. Historians still argue whether these child pharaohs actually wielded real power or were figureheads surrounded by regents pulling the strings. Some say the viziers and priests acted as puppet masters, ensuring the appearance of divine rulership while quietly managing affairs. Others suggest that even young rulers like Tutankhamun made crucial decisions, especially in religious restoration after the reign of Akhenaten, who had turned Egypt's gods upside down. Either way, it's not a carefree youth. No kite flying on the palace roof, no sneaking sweets from the kitchen. Your bedtime is dictated by omens. Your tutors teach you divine law, not knock-knock jokes. You spend your nights listening to dream interpreters analyze whether your dreams mean a prosperous harvest or doom via turtle. And then comes the physical toll. Let's be honest. Ancient royalty didn't exactly have ideal childhoods. Inbreeding was considered a way to keep divine bloodlines pure, which sounds noble in theory, but comes with its own set of complications. Modern studies on mummies suggest that young rulers like Tutankhamun suffered from a variety of health issues. Clubfoot, scoliosis, malaria, you name it. Imagine trying to walk through a temple in solid gold sandals when one of your legs doesn't work properly. You might rule the kingdom, but your bones ache like you're 60. You limp past statues built in your honor, knowing full well the sculptors made you taller and more heroic than reality would permit. Your portraits show you smiting enemies. In real life, you need a cane to walk down the stairs. And as if physical pain weren't enough, there's the looming specter of death. Not metaphorical death, actual death. Ancient Egypt was not a gentle place. Between disease, infections, heat stroke, and the occasional political assassination, the average lifespan wasn't exactly generous. Even for pharaohs, with all their incense and perfumes, the average reign could be tragically short. You might be divine, but germs didn't seem to care. And that brings us to the homework part. You'd think being pharaoh meant resting after death. But no. In Egypt, death is only the beginning, and boy, is it complicated. From the moment you're crowned, preparations for your death begin. Not out of morbid obsession, but because the afterlife is like a multi-layered bureaucratic obstacle course. Your tomb must be planned, your burial goods selected. Hundreds, possibly thousands of Shabti figurines must be commissioned to do your chores in the next world. Yes, even in the afterlife, you're outsourcing work. And then there's the Book of the Dead. It's not a novel. It's a series of spells, hymns, and instructions meant to guide your soul through the underworld, past all sorts of divine bouncers and moral judgment panels. You don't just wander into paradise, you earn it, with passwords, moral confessions, and prayers designed to prevent your heart from being eaten by a crocodile-headed demon named Ammit. Fun times. And you, as Pharaoh, must ensure the rituals are correct. The pyramid texts, the tomb wall inscriptions, the positioning of your sarcophagus. If anything is misaligned, you might get stuck in the Hall of Two Truths for eternity, awkwardly explaining to Anubis why you forgot spell 125. Quirky detail, some pharaohs even commissioned dummy tombs, or false burial chambers to fool grave robbers. Imagine going to all the trouble of building an eternal resting place, then also having to build a decoy just in case Larry the tomb looter shows up with a shovel. And you don't even get to pick your own tomb design freely. It must reflect cosmic harmony, align with sacred stars, and feature at least 3 walls depicting you defeating chaos, usually in the form of badly drawn foreign invaders or literal serpents. If your walls show too many battle scenes and not enough lotus flowers, someone might question your afterlife credentials. So, while you're still breathing, and barely halfway through puberty, you're already involved in your posthumous branding. You're reviewing sarcophagus prototypes, attending ritual rehearsals, approving canopic jar designs, and wondering whether being wrapped in 200 yards of linen will feel cozy or just claustrophobic. Meanwhile, everyone around you is already whispering about your legacy. Your vizier wants a statue of himself placed near your tomb's entrance. Your wife, who is also your half-sister, don't ask, is coordinating with the High Jachais, each priest about embalming oils. The palace cat seems unusually interested in the funerary incense. It's a lot. So you smile, you wave to the crowds, you perform the offering of Ma'at. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking about that unfinished wall in your tomb's antechamber. You hope the artist gets the eyes right. Because being a pharaoh isn't about living a long life. It's about making sure people remember you after you die. Preferably with your name spelled correctly, your organs properly pickled, and your Shabti army ready to work overtime. You're staring at it again. That massive triangle rising out of the desert like a petrified sunbeam. Smooth-sided, towering, casting a shadow longer than your royal barge. And it's not even finished. The Great Pyramid. Or rather, your pyramid. Or maybe your father's. Or was it your great-uncle's idea? At this point, it's hard to keep track. What you do know is that it wasn't your idea. But now, it's your legacy. Because once you wear the double crown of Egypt, you inherit more than just the throne. You inherit decades of building plans, blueprints carved into stone, sacred ratios of slope angles, and about 10,000 workers waiting on you to approve how sharp the apex should be. The pyramid is meant to guarantee your place in the afterlife, a literal staircase for your soul to climb into the stars. Grand, symbolic, poetic. Also, expensive, exhausting, and very, very sandy. Historians still argue whether pharaohs actually designed these monuments or simply signed off on plans drawn up by architects and priests. But you're definitely expected to show interest. Visit the site. Walk the perimeter. Offer bread to the foundation stones. Nod sagely when the chief engineer proposes adding a second false burial chamber just to confuse the robbers. And you do it. You do all of it. Even though, in your heart, you so. Me times wish you could just be buried in a nice lotus-covered crypt by the river. Something tasteful, maybe with a painted ceiling and a comfortable ramp. But no. Your pyramid must outshine all others. That's the rule. You can't just preserve order, you must proclaim it in 2.5 million limestone blocks. The workers are organized into squads with names like the Drunkards of Menkora or Friends of Khufu's Majesty. They labor through the sun-soaked hours, hauling sleds and singing hymns that sound suspiciously like complaints. You walk among them occasionally, flanked by guards and fan-bearers. Some bow, some pretend not to notice you. One mutters a prayer to Ptah while adjusting a rope that's threatening to saw off his own arm. Your architects assure you the pyramid is proceeding on schedule. You don't ask what that means anymore. And then there's the internal layout. Because pyramids aren't just giant triangles. They're full of secret chambers, sloped tunnels, false doors, air shafts aligned with Orion's belt, and sometimes even spirit corridors, meant to let your Ka, spirit, stretch its metaphysical legs. You're expected to approve all of it. One priest recommends including a hidden trapdoor that drops grave robbers into a pit of scorpions. Another suggests a serene hallway lined with paintings of you offering bread to Ra every Tuesday. A third insists on the full solar bark model, life-sized, so your spirit won't get bored. And don't forget the outer casing stones. Smooth white Tura limestone, meant to gleam in the sun like frozen lightning. You've only approved 20% so far. The rest are delayed due to, surprise, a scribe's error in the weight logs. You're assured it's being handled. You are not reassured. Quirky note. Pyramid graffiti found by archaeologists suggests that workers sometimes made jokes about you. Light-hearted ones, perhaps. Our pharaoh's shadow stretches far, but not as far as his ego, reads one chunk of limestone. You pretend you didn't see it. You order it plastered over. But privately, you admit. It was a pretty good line. Every few months, there's a blessing ceremony at the site. You climb to a special platform overlooking the build, offer incense, sprinkle milk, and nod while the high priest talks about eternity, geometry, and the incorruptibility of stone. The speech lasts 3 hours. You think about figs. And all this? It's just the exterior. Inside, you're also curating your eternal image, selecting which gods to include in the artwork, which offerings to depict, and how your favorite sandals should be arranged next to your canopic jars. It's like organizing the world's most complicated funeral slideshow. You wonder, will anyone visit this monument? Will they gaze at it in awe? Or will they chip off the gold and repurpose the limestone to build a granary? Because, spoiler alert, they often do. The irony of being a god king is that you spend your entire life preparing for your death. And most of that preparation involves directing more construction crews than a modern stadium project. You oversee quarries, shipping routes, stonecutters, and rope makers. You approve ceremonial scaffolding designs. You sign off on reed brush contracts. You nod politely when the scribe explains that the sacred brickmaker needs more cow dung. And every time you ask, "Can we finish this in my lifetime?" there's an awkward pause. You begin to suspect that, like your great-great-grandfather, you might not live to see the top stone placed. And so, contingency plans are drawn. Alternate tombs, smaller pyramids, speedier embalming teams. You try not to take it personally. Historians still argue whether the sheer scale of these projects was more about faith, power, or political theater. Probably all three. The pyramid is your divine billboard, your guarantee of cosmic stability, and a very public way to remind both gods and mortals that you're in charge, even when you're not around to enforce it. But you also know this. No one remembers the pharaoh who skipped his pyramid. So you keep signing off on limestone shipments. You keep inspecting bricks. You keep listening to priests debate whether the alignment should favor Sirius or Polaris. You yawn discreetly while someone reads the 400-line hymn intended to be carved above your false door. You've never climbed the thing. It's not done. But you can already feel it looming behind you, a quiet presence in every festival, every decree, every dream. And one day, when the last block is placed and the final amulet tucked beside your mummified toes, you'll rest beneath that giant triangle, surrounded by jars, scrolls, and statues of yourself looking very confident. But not yet. For now, you squint at the horizon and say, maybe add one more chamber, just in case. You're holding a cup of beer, warmed slightly because chilled drinks haven't been invented yet, and enjoying the illusion of calm. It's late afternoon. The sun slants low across the river, casting the palm trees in syrupy gold. Priests bustle quietly through the palace, servants sweep the courtyards, and a harpist somewhere is playing something that sounds vaguely like, "Please don't let there be another festival tomorrow." Then, a bird call. Sharp. Too sharp. You freeze. It was a lapwing, or maybe a hoopoe. Either way, someone in the temple courtyard just audibly gasped. The kind of gasp that means omens are being read. Again. Because as Pharaoh, your life is ruled not just by tradition, but by symbols. Everything is a sign. A sneeze during a ritual might mean famine. A dream of a fish? Possibly war. A priest's beard falling off mid-blessing? The gods are displeased. With you, specifically. You remember yesterday's issue with the incense bowl tipping over during the invocation of Ra. Today, the scribes are still parsing whether that's a sign of political instability or just an unusually aggressive breeze. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians genuinely believed every random event was a divine message or whether it was more of a ceremonial excuse to cover bureaucratic decisions. Either way, you don't have the luxury of ignoring a sneeze. Not when the high priest is already shuffling toward you with a concerned look and a scroll filled with hieroglyphs. You dreamt of crocodiles last week, he reminds you gently. Then this bird call. And now, a cloud shaped like a cobra. It is wise to fast today. You blink. You were just about to have lunch. But now, thanks to an unusually shaped cumulus cloud, your afternoon meal is replaced by silent contemplation and symbolic cleansing. Again, you sigh and hand over your beer. The high priest nods approvingly. You show wisdom, O steady heart of Maat. He bows. You mutter something divine. The entire kingdom revolves around omens. Dreams, weather, animal movements, even how your bread bakes in the morning. Each can shift policy, delay military action, or demand spontaneous construction of a new shrine to appease Sekhmet, who apparently dislikes uneven loaves. Remember that time a bat flew into the royal kitchen? 4 weeks of offerings, 2 new priestesses, a temporary ban on lentils. And don't even get started on dreams. You have a dedicated dream interpreter whose only job is to sit outside your bedchamber and write down every mumble, twitch, or ambiguous snore. One time you dreamed about falling off a boat and they declared it a message from Thoth that your calendar needed revising. So you revised it. You added a festival day for proper anchoring. The gods, you see, are always watching. They don't send emails. They send hippos that wander too close to the palace, or bees that sting the wrong temple guard, or priests who accidentally spill sacred oil during a lunar rite, and all of it lands on your shoulders. You can't shrug. You can't say, "That's probably just coincidence." You're the pharaoh. You're the bridge between heaven and earth. Your very heartbeat is supposed to echo divine rhythm. And if a ibis flies east instead of north, guess who gets blamed? It's gotten so complex that you've developed a look, a specific kind of half smile, half frown, with a solemn head tilt, that you use whenever someone brings up another celestial sign. It says, "Yes, I hear the voice of the gods, and no, I am not crying on the inside." You wear it often. The problem is, everyone else is watching for omens too. Your courtiers compete to interpret every minor event. They want to look devout, clever, indispensable. So they say things like, "My Pharaoh, the lotus blooms late this season, surely the south shall rise in bounty." Or, "Sire, the temple cat yawned 7 times. Perhaps the Nile requires a new statue." It would be funny if it didn't mean ordering yet another sculpture of a baboon holding a fish. Quirky detail. Some omens were so specific that ancient Egyptian manuals included interpretation guides. A dream about a tall woman? Good luck. A dream about eating crocodile meat? Bad. Very bad. You once dreamed of eating honey on a reed boat. The priest spent 6 days arguing whether that meant sweetness in travel or betrayal during a journey. You haven't left the palace since. And let's talk about you. Your moods are omens. If you look tired, someone declares a bad harvest. If you laugh unexpectedly, a guard drops his spear in fear. The time you sneeze during the spring festival, people are still rebuilding the north shrine of Neith. Even your footsteps are watched. Once you tripped on a loose tile near the statue of Horus. A scribe wrote, "The falcon god demands re-examination of the Western grain ritual." And just like that, your agricultural advisors were reciting blessings in a field for 5 straight days. Historians point to this overwhelming atmosphere as part of the priesthood's power. By embedding signs and symbols into every part of life, they maintained influence over the pharaoh's decisions. After all, if every action has a divine meaning, you can never fully act alone. So naturally, you start to second-guess everything. You stare at the ceiling in the bathhouse, wondering if that crack in the plaster looks more like a cobra or a scarab. You pause before eating an apple. Is this the day the apple is a symbol of betrayal or prosperity? You wish the gods would just use a chalkboard sometimes. Eventually, the pressure gets to you. You issue a decree. Fewer omens, just for a week. A divine sabbatical, if you will. The priests respond by dreaming of an eclipse. You nod, sigh, and authorize the construction of a new observatory. Later that evening, as you watch a pair of frogs hop across your courtyard in perfect sync, you hold your breath. The priest behind you says nothing, just nods and writes something in his scroll. Probably something along the lines of, "When the frogs dance in harmony, the pharaoh shall dream of calm." You hope he's right. Because being a pharaoh isn't just about power or pyramids. It's about surviving a world where every sneeze is sacred, every bird a divine telegram, and every shadow might be your destiny reshuffling itself. You look up at the night sky and say aloud, "Please, no dreams tonight." It begins with a bath. Not a luxurious soak in petals and privacy. No, your purification ritual involves standing stock still while 3 temple attendants pour chilly water over your head from carved alabaster jars, each one chanting a different line from the hymn to the sacred glands of purity. You'd ask them to coordinate, but that would probably violate divine harmony. And this, unfortunately, is only the beginning. Because today is Mummification Day. Not for you, thankfully, but for one of your recently departed high officials, a vizier perhaps, or a royal cousin whose heart unfortunately stopped beating mid-festival. And as pharaoh, you are expected to preside. Because death in Egypt is not private, it's cosmic, public, deeply symbolic, and surprisingly technical. And when your time comes, you'll get the full treatment, whether you want it or not. It may sound odd now, but the whole point of being a pharaoh is to never truly die. Your body must be preserved forever. Every limb, organ, eyelash, and toenail handled with sacred care, swaddled in linen, perfumed in resins, placed in gold-encrusted boxes, and buried with enough furniture to start a mid-sized Airbnb. Let's be clear though, mummification is not a gentle process. It starts with your brain. Because for reasons still debated by modern scholars, the ancient Egyptians did not value the brain as much as you might expect. It was thought of as a sort of useless jelly, like the god Osiris's leftovers. So when you die, your embalmers take a long bronze hook, slide it up your nostril, scramble your brain like divine egg salad, and drain it out. Not exactly the retirement plan you envisioned. Historians still argue whether the embalmers fully removed every bit of the brain, or whether they just sort of stirred it and hoped the gods wouldn't notice. Either way, the process involves a lot of nosebleeds and an assistant holding your head steady while muttering apologies to Anubis. Then comes the stomach, and the lungs, and the liver. These are carefully removed and placed in their own jars, each protected by a different god. The baboon-headed god gets the lungs. The falcon gets the intestines. You wonder briefly whether they ever swapped lids just for fun. Your heart, however, is different. Your heart is sacred. It stays inside. It's the part of you that will be weighed against a feather in the afterlife. Too heavy? Your soul is devoured by Ammit, the crocodile-lion-hippopotamus hybrid who basically serves as Egypt's cosmic garbage disposal. So yes, you need that heart. Unless, of course, someone decides to replace it with a stone scarab. That happened to a few pharaohs. We're still not sure why. Possibly an embalming mistake. Possibly a passive-aggressive gesture by an underpaid priest. Anyway, once the organs are removed and stored properly, your body is filled with natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture. This dries you out, thoroughly. You will not be juicy in the afterlife. You will be dry, crisp, and, ideally, aromatic. Quirky note: some embalmers stuffed onions under the eyelids of mummies to give the appearance of open, alert eyes. Others used linen pads, mud, or even painted stones. You can imagine waking up in the afterlife with a mild headache and the vague impression you've become a papier-mâché sculpture. Once sufficiently dried, this takes 40 days, you are coated in resin, wrapped in layers upon layers of linen, sometimes with prayers written directly onto the bandages, and sprinkled with amulets, scarabs, ankhs, protective eyes. There's even an amulet designed to prevent your mummy from being turned upside down. Ancient problems, modern vibes. You're also painted. Sometimes with gold leaf, sometimes with ochre or lapis lazuli. And if you were a particularly fashionable pharaoh, your coffin will include a false beard, even in death, to let everyone know you're still divine, just a bit more horizontal. And then comes the box. Not just any box. A series of boxes, like Russian nesting dolls, each more elaborately carved than the last. The outer coffin may feature your likeness, painted with serene almond-shaped eyes and a peaceful smile, conveniently ignoring the hook incident. You're placed inside the sarcophagus along with hundreds of items: furniture, food, statues, sandals, even board games. The idea is that you'll need all this in the afterlife. A whole second career. One that involves daily rituals, offerings, and occasional warfare with chaotic forces. Basically retirement, but with more snakes. Some pharaohs requested entire boats to be buried near their tombs. Others demanded libraries, musical instruments, or full kitchens, because you never know when you'll need a roast goose in eternity. Historians still debate whether all this extravagance was for the dead or for the living, to reassure the people that their ruler had secured a place in the afterlife, and therefore so would they. Either way, it's elaborate, expensive, and logistically impressive. But here's the uncomfortable part. None of it is guaranteed. Your pyramid might be looted, your tomb might be flooded, your name might be chiseled out by a rival, and then, your soul wanders. To prevent that, you commission statues, dozens, sometimes hundreds, with your face and your name. Even if your body is destroyed, your ka can inhabit one of these backup vessels. It's a spiritual redundancy plan. Pharaohs, the original cloud storage. You also bribe the priests, generously. to keep your mortuary cult going, to offer food to your tomb daily, to recite the proper spells, because if they stop, you starve in the field of reeds. Yes, dead you can still go hungry. There is no rest for the royal. And as you watch today's embalming ritual for your late advisor, you can't help but feel preemptively itchy. He lies still, skin chalky, nostrils already packed with linen. The priests chant. The scribe records his titles. A cat walks across the natron basin. Everyone pretends not to notice. You sigh, because someday it'll be you on that slab, and you can only hope your feather measures out. The royal marriage ceremony begins at dawn. Again, you're seated on your gold-inlaid throne, draped in the softest linen that still manages to feel like sandpaper after 4 hours, while the high priest recites 32 verses about divine union, fertility, and the harmonious balancing of cosmic opposites. Next to you stands your bride, who is also your half-sister, or cousin, or niece. You've honestly stopped keeping track. Because here's the truth. As Pharaoh, you don't marry for love. You marry for divine bloodline consolidation. A delightful phrase which in practice means keeping the royal family tree less tree and more loop. It all starts with the ancient belief in divinity by blood. Pharaohs are living gods. Their children, therefore, must carry that divine spark. And while commoners are lovely and all, their blood is simply too mortal. The solution? Marry within the family, again, and again, and again. Historians still argue whether these intermarriages were as common as records suggest, or if they were exaggerated for symbolism. But there's plenty of evidence, marriage contracts, temple reliefs, and more than one suspiciously identical family portrait that suggest keeping it in the line was standard practice. So you marry your sister or your daughter, maybe both. Don't worry, this is considered noble, sacred, expected. The gods did it after all. Isis married Osiris, her brother, and no one batted a divine eye. You're just following the mythological precedent. Not creepy, just religious. And the wedding itself? Oh, it's a spectacle. Musicians, dancers, incense by the barrel, and enough palm frond waving to start a small hurricane. Priests chant about your union restoring the balance of the heavens. Meanwhile, you're mentally composing a polite speech for your next bride's uncle, who is also your uncle, and possibly your grandfather. It's complicated. The feast after the ceremony is even grander. Stuffed pigeons, candied dates, honey cakes stacked in the shape of sacred cows. Guests toss lotus petals and offer toasts in your honor to the eternal blood of Horus, which, in this case, means both you and your now wife, who was previously your baby cousin and once ate sand at a palace picnic. It's not romantic, it's bureaucratic. And your wives? You'll have more than one. Maybe 7. Maybe 70. Some are noble women offered by regional governors hoping for favor. Others are foreign princesses sent to seal alliances. You smile politely as a princess from Hatti offers you a golden amulet and looks like she'd rather be anywhere else. Her name is unpronounceable. Her dowry includes a chest of pickled garlic and a very confused goat. But your great royal wife, that's the important one. She's the one depicted in the temples, the one you build monuments with, the one who shares your throne, ceremonially, of course. She is usually also your sister, or your cousin's sister, or your aunt-niece. It's like playing divine bingo with the family reunion guest list. Quirky fact, some pharaohs, like Akhenaten, even married their daughters to reinforce their lineage. Others elevated secondary wives to great wife status posthumously if their children ascended the throne. Royal titles were flexible, as long as the blood remained sparkly enough for the gods. You try to get along with your royal wives. You share formal meals, exchange ceremonial gifts, pose for statues. But you're constantly navigating internal rivalries. Who gets what chamber? Whose son has which title? Who was granted the golden ankh at the festival of Hathor? These small favors ripple through the palace like sand in a wine jug. One wife dreams of a cobra curling around a pomegranate. Another claims she saw a falcon land on her balcony. Both declare themselves favored by Horus. You smile, nod, and offer them both additional bracelets. You're now down 3 barrels of lapis and a dozen peace offerings. But no civil war. Yet. And the children? You'll have many. Too many, probably. The walls of your tomb won't have enough space to list them all. They'll grow up as priests, governors, generals, or pawns in your ongoing political jigsaw. Some are trained from birth to rule. Others are quietly moved to distant villas with polite but permanent assignments like overseer of regional goat census. And here's the kicker. Not all of your children will live. Infant mortality is high, disease is common, and palace doctors, though revered, still treat fevers with crushed beetles and hopeful prayers. Each child is a gamble. Each heir is a fragile thread in your very complicated, very sacred tapestry. Sometimes you wonder what it's like to marry for love, to walk in the gardens and laugh without calculating dowries. But that's not your role. You are Pharaoh. You marry for cosmic order, not candlelit dinners. Still, you find small moments of peace. A wife who likes the same fruit as you. A child who draws pictures of boats on temple scraps. A niece wife who writes decent poetry about hippos. You treasure these. Quietly. And when the time comes to arrange a marriage for your heir, you'll marry them to their cousin, because the gods demand it. The wind howls gently through the temple courtyard, scattering petals from yesterday's feast. You sit in your audience chamber, waiting. A priest is late. That's unusual. Priests are never late, not unless something's wrong. Then he appears, breathless, pale, slightly sweaty under his leopard skin sash. His hands tremble as he bows too low. You already know what's coming. "Sire," he whispers, "someone has chiseled your name from the wall at Com Ombo." Silence. You blink. Not just any wall, but your wall. The one carved with your royal cartouches, your divine deeds, your mighty proclamations etched in stone for eternity. Or, until someone with a sharp tool and a political grudge decides to erase you. Because in Egypt, to be forgotten is worse than death. The ancient Egyptians believed that to speak a name was to give it life. To carve it was to preserve that life across millennia. And to remove it? That's obliteration. Not just of your image, but your soul. Your ka, your ba, your ability to move through the field of reeds, all at risk. Because some petty rival didn't like your barley policy. It's called damnatio memoriae, a fancy Latin phrase we've retrofitted to this very Egyptian problem. You can be unmade after you're already gone. Historians still argue whether this erasure was always political or sometimes religious. Some removals appear surgical, targeted, methodical, like what happened to Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who was literally scraped off her own monuments by a later king. Others seem more chaotic, like when Akhenaten's name was struck from nearly every record after his radical god reform upset everyone with a temple and a scroll. And now, it's happening to you. Not on every monument, just one. But one is enough. You feel it in your chest. That cold pit of dread, deeper than even the darkest tomb shaft. Because if one priest dared to scrape your name, others might follow, and the longer your successors rule, the more they may want to distance themselves from you. You summon your royal scribes. "We must restore it," you say calmly. "Recarve it, add extra flourishes, make it even bigger." They nod quickly. "And perhaps a statue?" "Yes, a statue. A big one. Preferably with you smiting some symbolic enemies. Maybe add a cat for extra appeal. The gods like cats." You know how this game works. Legacy in Egypt isn't a given. It's a constant battle, fought with chisels and memory. Even during life, your image is everywhere. On walls, on scrolls, on ceremonial daggers, on commemorative wine jars. You're depicted riding chariots, making offerings, defeating foreigners, stroking lotus flowers while looking mysteriously pleased. These images aren't just PR, they're spiritual anchors. They tell the gods who you are. They remind your descendants that you mattered. But all it takes is a hammer, a few well-placed chips. And suddenly, your nose is gone. Your name has a blank oval. Your legacy is now a guessing game. You remember the statue in the Northern Temple, the one where your name was misspelled. It was supposed to say, "Beloved of Amun, son of Ra." Instead, it read, "Beloved of Tuna." No one caught it for years. You laughed when you found out, but now, it feels ominous. Because if they can't read your name, how will they call you in the afterlife? Quirky fact: ancient tomb builders sometimes carved decoy names in hidden places, just in case the main ones were defaced, like spiritual backups. If this name is destroyed, the logic went, here's another one hidden behind the statue's armpit. You consider adding a few of these yourself, maybe etched inside your sandal strap. Of course, some names were purposefully forgotten: usurpers, heretics, rival claimants. Even gods fell victim. The god Set, once revered as a protector, was gradually scrubbed from many monuments after being rebranded as chaotic and untrustworthy. His animal-headed statues were melted down, his symbols reinterpreted. Even gods weren't safe. You stare at the nearby mural, a pristine image of you offering incense to Horus, still intact. For now. You wonder who will keep it that way after you're gone. You order a ceremony, a reconsecration of your name. Special offerings, candles, prayers, the full protocol. You stand before your court and speak your titles again, voice firm but quiet. I am Horus the Victorious, he of the Sedge and Bee, son of Ra, restorer of Ma'at. Everyone echoes the words, but you still feel the chill. Because you know too well, names fade. Dust covers stone. New rulers come, and they don't want to share space. You think of the nameless statues in the old tombs. Once mighty kings, now blank-faced, stripped of identity. They wear crowns, but no one knows which pharaoh they were. Their stories died with their names. You won't let that happen to you. More statues, more cartouches, more stories. Because to survive eternity in Egypt, you must be remembered. Another banquet. Another long, echoing hall. Another 5-course ceremonial meal you didn't ask for. The dishes are exquisite. Roasted goose with pomegranate glaze, honey-soaked cakes shaped like lotuses, and barley beer so strong it could summon the gods accidentally. You'd be impressed if you weren't absolutely exhausted. Because once again, you have to eat in public. There's no such thing as a quiet dinner when you're Pharaoh. Every meal is a performance, a declaration, a ritual. You don't dine. You offer nourishment to the divine vessel of kingship in accordance with celestial harmony, which, loosely translated, means you chew while everyone watches. And they do watch. The vizier watches to see if you choose the lentils over the goose. The priests take note if you leave the bread untouched. The nobles murmur among themselves if your goblet is refilled twice. Even the food itself is symbolic. Certain cuts of meat represent strength, certain spices represent wisdom, and the fruit platter apparently stands for the unity of the two lands. All you wanted was a fig. Historians still debate whether these meals were truly as formal as temple art suggests, or whether the pharaoh occasionally got to sneak a bite in private. But judging from the sheer number of ritual feasts recorded in tomb inscriptions, it's safe to say that even snack time came with a side of theology. Your meal begins with a blessing. Then see. Omi's the presentation of edible abundance, where servants carry in food on golden trays while chanting your 5 names. You must raise your hand at the correct moment, after the 3rd verse, not the 4th, and bless the barley. Or was it the goose today? The protocol scroll changed last week. You're seated on a platform, flanked by 2 fan bearers. Below, the guests murmur reverently as they eat. You, however, must take small bites, chew thoughtfully, and appear as if you're contemplating the mysteries of the universe while mentally screaming, Is this carrot symbolic of something again? There's no room for messiness. You've been trained since childhood to eat with grace. No slurping, no licking your fingers, and definitely no letting the grape fall from the vine. That could imply weakness. Or worse, sloppy divine energy. Even your plate is a symbol, decorated with sacred animals, color-coded for specific festivals. The lotus design means rebirth. The duck motif is for abundance. The time they accidentally gave you a fish plate during the drought festival? Awkward. You had to order a second prayer to cleanse the dining room. And don't even think about eating alone. You tried it once. Just once. A quiet evening in your inner chamber, a plate of dates, maybe a bit of leftover cake. 5 minutes into your first bite, a priest walked in with a tray of incense and began a cleansing chant for unauthorized nourishment. You now eat only in designated rooms, at scheduled times, with a minimum of 6 witnesses and 1 temple cat. Quirky note: some pharaohs employed official food tasters, not just to test for poison, but to ensure the divine balance of taste. If a dish was too sour or too sweet, it might be considered cosmically unbalanced. You once rejected a stew for being slightly spicy. The chef wept for 3 days. The priest reassigned him to carrot duty. And let's not forget that your presence at the table is a kind of spell. Your chewing affirms the harmony of the land. Your swallowing maintains the flood cycle. Your digestion literally ensures the sun will rise. No pressure. You sip from your ceremonial goblet. It's shaped like a lotus, rimmed with lapis. The drink is thick, sweet, and fermented to near collapse. You'd prefer water, but that's for mortals. The gods drink beer, or wine, or whatever this murky liquid is that smells faintly of raisins and vinegar. Then there's the conversation. Guests must speak only when spoken to. If they address you, it must be in praise. O radiant one, how perfectly you hold that pomegranate. Or, truly, your chewing maintains the balance of the cosmos. You nod, pretend not to choke slightly on a fig seed, and murmur, "May the Nile bless your irrigation canal." Even laughter is formal. No belly laughs, just polite chuckles, timed with the rhythm of the flute. You once let out a real laugh during a joke about crocodiles. A courtier fainted. 2 scribes wrote it down. The temple declared a minor festival. Sometimes, between bites of ceremonial goose and endless blessings, you dream of sneaking away. Just once. To sit under a palm tree with a slice of melon and no one interpreting your every nibble as a statement of cosmic intent. But that's not your life. You're Pharaoh. You do not snack. You sanctify sustenance. Still, you find small rebellions. You request more garlic than usual in the stew. You pretend not to hear when someone praises your melon technique. You even, once, finish a meal early. The priests panicked. Is the pharaoh displeased? Was the pomegranate unworthy? Shall we cleanse the plates with natron? You waved them off, said you were full, which, in divine terms, was interpreted as, the gods are satisfied. You sighed. They chanted. You sat in. Silence while 3 temple attendants fanned you with ostrich feathers and a 4th recited a hymn to digestive clarity. And then, another scroll arrives. Tomorrow's meal will be a reenactment of the Festival of Eternal Nourishment. More symbolic cucumbers. Wonderful. Gold. So much gold. It spills from chests in your storerooms, glints from every temple ornament, lines the rim of your favorite goblet, and coats statues of you feeding lotus petals to gods who don't actually eat. You sleep surrounded by it. You walk on it. You're probably inhaling trace particles of it right now. And yet, none of it will follow you where you're going. Because when you die, you don't take your gold with you. You bury it, all of it, for eternity. Or at least until some very ambitious tomb robber finds a shovel. This is the paradox of being Pharaoh. You hoard unimaginable wealth not to spend, not to display, but to entomb with you inside a mountain of limestone and hope no one breaks in to take it. And everyone does try to take it. Honestly, you'd be better off hiding your treasure in a bakery. Your tomb, when finished, will be a treasure chest the size of a small town. You'll be surrounded by golden statues, bejeweled sandals, ceremonial chariots with silver wheels, fans made from ostrich feathers and ivory handles, and a throne so encrusted with semi-precious stones that it's more mosaic than furniture. All of it packed away like divine luggage for your cosmic road trip. Historians still debate whether the sheer opulence of pharaonic burials was meant to reflect religious belief, royal power, or just very aggressive peer pressure from previous dynasties. Either way, the trend stuck. Build a tomb, fill it with treasure, pray the afterlife has decent locks. But let's face it, no matter how many curses you have carved on your walls, cursed be the one who disturbs this tomb. Someone is going to disturb this tomb. They always do. You know the stories. Whole crews of thieves arrested with pockets full of gold leaf and sheepish excuses. Priests bribed to look the other way. Tomb guardians who accidentally misplaced their keys. Some robbers even pretended to be priests blessing the tomb, all while tucking gold toe rings into their robes. And when they get inside, they take everything. The gold, the jewelry, the chariots. Even the jars meant to hold your liver. Yes, your liver. There's nothing sacred when a market needs inventory. Quirky detail. In some tombs, archaeologists found fake treasures, plated wooden objects, painted to mimic wealth. A decoy strategy, like wrapping a brick in foil and hoping the gods, or at least the robbers, won't look too closely. Still, you do your best. You order the walls of your tomb painted with elaborate spells. You add secret corridors, false doors, dead-end tunnels. One architect even suggests a collapsing ceiling trap. Very fashionable this century, he says. You nod thoughtfully, wondering if he might be planning to come back later with a crowbar. Even the layout of your treasure is strategic. Wealth at the front, decoys in the middle, real gems tucked deep in the burial chamber. Your sarcophagus? It's nested like a royal babushka doll. Stone, gold, inlaid wood, gold again. By the time someone reaches your actual body, they've passed 7 divine obstacles and probably re-injured their back. Still, the odds aren't great. You won't be in your tomb a century before someone pokes around. You imagine it now. A group of men with oil lamps and pickaxes, whispering through the corridors, their breath fogging in the cool, dry air. They chip at the plaster, pry open your coffin, and there you are. Pharaoh, eternal king. And they steal your sandals, not even the gold ones, just your regular beaded pair. You try not to take it personally, because at some point, all of this, your gold, your tomb, your treasures, becomes less about you and more about what you represent. To the living, your burial is a promise, that even death can be elegant, that even decay can be gilded, that the universe has an order so precise it includes a throne for your spirit in the sky. To your subjects, you're not just gone, you're somewhere else, eating celestial figs, reclining on golden cushions, issuing divine decrees about papyrus growth while the stars wink approvingly. But to the next dynasty, you're just another statue to move, another name to scratch out, another vault to mine when the treasury runs dry. They'll say it's about practicality, or necessity, or correcting divine imbalance, but really, they just want your gold. You try to protect your legacy in other ways. You commission additional stelae, stone slabs with your name and face. You donate golden statues to multiple temples, even ones you don't like. You have your royal titles carved twice on your sarcophagus, just in case one side gets chipped. Still, deep down, you know, all this glitter, it's just a form of memory insurance. Gold lasts, stone fades, names vanish. But if someone stumbles upon your tomb, dazzled by the light bouncing off your golden throne, maybe, just maybe, they'll whisper your name, even if it's while pocketing your amulets. You sigh and sip your barley beer. Later, you'll inspect the jewelry room again, And maybe order one more curse carved above the door for good measure. Nothing too scary, just a little something about eternal sandworms and itchy feet. The sun is barely up, and already a priest is knocking on your chamber door. You groan, not out loud, of course. Pharaohs don't groan, you merely exhale with deep celestial resonance. The priest bows and announces, with the calm urgency of someone who said this sentence 1,000 times before, Great One, the gods are requesting your attention again. Of course they are, because the gods never stop calling. They don't send messages once a year. They don't check in seasonally. They're always there, whispering through temple walls, through dreams, through oddly shaped clouds, and the way a bird lands on a pillar. You are Pharaoh, their bridge to the mortal world, and that bridge doesn't get a day off. Today's divine request? A letter to Ra, a literal written prayer. You sit at a low table, a scribe ready with brush and ink. You dictate, carefully. To Ra, mighty flame of the sky, I humbly acknowledge the sunrise, its brightness, its generosity, and the mild sunburn it gave me yesterday. The scribe pauses. Shall I leave in the sunburn, radiance of the horizon? You shake your head. No. Just say, it's warmth. Every god has a domain, and every domain has a demand. Ra expects praise with the morning sun. Thoth wants offerings before scribal decrees. Bastet, the cat goddess, requires regular incense, or your palace cats will mysteriously knock over 7 important scrolls in protest. Historians still argue whether these godly communications were taken as literal, two-way conversations or symbolic affirmations of faith. Either way, the pharaoh had to act as if they were being constantly monitored, and that's exhausting. Even mundane events require ritual framing. A flood? Speak to Hapi, god of the Nile. A sneeze? Acknowledge it with a nod to Shu, god of air. Drop your scepter? That's probably set testing your patience again. And let's not forget Horus. You're literally his living embodiment, which means if you stub your toe, someone might call for an emergency falcon blessing. You can't even bathe without it being a divine act. The water must be purified, the oils must be blessed, the towels must be folded to reflect cosmic balance. Once, a towel was folded sideways instead of corner to corner, and someone declared it a prophecy of war. You spent the entire afternoon viewing border security reports. You sometimes envy your palace animals. The crocodiles just bask. The cats stretch. No one expects them to consult the gods. They are gods. You, on the other hand, have to respond. Today alone, you've spoken 3 blessings over the barley granaries. Relit the incense at the altar of Ma'at because someone let it go out. Authorized a scribe to write a 14-line poem comparing you to the morning dew. Received a message from a minor temple in the Delta asking whether the frog chorus heard at dusk was a sign of divine approval or moisture imbalance. Your response? Yes. Then there's the temple circuit. You must visit each major shrine regularly to remind the gods you're still listening. At the Temple of Amun, you walk barefoot down a corridor lined with gold leaf reliefs. At the Temple of Ptah, you stand perfectly still while sacred smoke wafts around you. At the Temple of Hathor, you listen to 6 verses of an ancient love hymn translated into falsetto flute. You try not to fall asleep. Every action you take is tied to the gods. Every harvest depends on your divine alignment. Every storm requires ritual interpretation. If you don't perform the rites just so, chaos might return. Or at least, that's what the priests keep reminding you. Quirky fact, there's an ancient spell called the opening of the mouth, meant to awaken the senses of statues and mummies so they can eat, speak, and breathe in the afterlife. You've personally performed this on no fewer than 17 statues in the last 2 months. Sometimes you swear one of them blinked. Your voice is tired. Your knees ache from bowing. But the requests don't stop. A messenger arrives with a dream someone had about you floating in a papyrus boat made of starlight. The gods are speaking, they say. What do they want? You answer, maybe just a nap. Later, a drought is reported in the southern provinces. You're asked to perform a ritual dance before a sacred sycamore tree. You haven't danced since the last festival of renewal, when you accidentally stepped on a high priest's sandal and caused a minor theological crisis. Still, you comply, you sway, you lift your arms, you invoke the sky. The tree rustles, everyone nods in approval. You return to your palace and attempt to sit quietly for a moment. A jug of wine, a bowl of dates, some peace. But then a temple bell rings. A goose honks oddly. A breeze knocks over a clay jug. The gods are speaking again. You sigh. Because being Pharaoh means you never get to say, I think the gods have the wrong number. They always know where to find you. You're lounging in your palace garden, finally not being pelted with sacred dates or asked to approve a new barley tax. The sun filters through palm fronds, birds chirp melodically, and a servant is fanning you with a large frond in the shape of a lotus, symbolic of rebirth, relaxation, and, apparently, a very sore arm. Then a priest clears his throat. Uh-oh. He bows deeply and unrolls a scroll. O Radiant One, the Council of Temple Planners humbly reminds you, your birthday is approaching. You blink. Ah, right. That, your birthday. In most lives, it's a day of cake and mild embarrassment over how many candles are on the table. But not for you. You're Pharaoh. Your birthday is a national event. It's a festival, a ceremony, a military parade, a religious rite, and a budget-consuming celebration rolled into one. Forget balloons, your birthday demands a temple, a whole new one, built from scratch, every year. You stare at the priest. Another temple? You ask quietly. He nods. Of course. To mark the cosmic importance of your birth and the unending cycle of divine renewal. May I suggest we name this one the Pavilion of Everlasting Excellence and slightly larger columns than last year's temple? Historians still argue whether the annual temple building tradition was taken quite so literally, but there's strong evidence that birthdays, coronation anniversaries, and royal jubilees were marked with large-scale construction, symbolic rituals, and more commemorative stelae than a person could possibly admire in a single lifetime. So now your architects are summoned. Again. They arrive with stacks of papyri and clay models. This year, one says excitedly, we were thinking of a lotus-shaped colonnade, with gold filigree, and a ramp. Another chimes in. We've sourced blue granite from the southern quarries. It only takes 7 months to transport, and we only lost 3 donkeys last time. You nod sagely, because that's what a divine king does. Meanwhile, the treasurer mutters in the corner, calculating whether you can afford another temple and continue funding the annual festival of fish blessing in Lower Nubia. You don't have the heart to cancel either. And the celebrations don't stop at architecture. There's a ritual regatta on the Nile in your honor. Dozens of boats decked in papyrus garlands sail past while musicians play songs about your divinely smooth elbows and favorable shadow length. Quirky detail. Ancient songs often praised oddly specific body parts. Your elbows, your calves, your ears. One ode, attributed to a temple musician, includes the line, O Pharaoh, your knees are like the rolling dunes, firm and slightly sacred. You try to take it as a compliment. Back at the palace, artisans prepare thousands of clay oil lamps to light the grand courtyard. There's a risk of setting several storage rooms on fire again. But what's a royal celebration without a bit of drama? Meanwhile, nobles from across Egypt arrive with gifts, chariots, perfumes, jewels, and the occasional highly confused monkey dressed in ceremonial linen. You thank them graciously, even when one of the monkeys bites your priest. A special birthday hymn is composed. You rehearse smiling through the 6 verses. During the main ceremony, you must stand still for 3 hours while priests chant about your birth under a favorable star, the alignment of Orion, and the 7 cow goddesses who allegedly mooed in harmony the day you were born. You want to believe that's true. You also want a nap. But it's not over. After the chanting, you must perform the ritual renewal of kingship, a symbolic act where you reenact your divine birth and reaffirm your cosmic purpose. This involves wearing a crown made of fresh reeds, itchy, standing barefoot on a specially painted glyph, cold, and being sprinkled with sacred water from 7 different rivers, inconveniently splashy. You keep a serene face through it all. Inside, you wonder if it's still your birthday, or if you've somehow looped into your funeral arrangements. Later, the scribes bring you the official birthday tally. 2 statues erected, 1 obelisk commissioned, 4 papyri inscribed with royal praises, 1 monkey-induced injury, 17 new oaths sworn in your name, and, of course, the foundation stone laid for the temple of the perpetual blooming of divine youth. You sip your wine and stare at the moon rising above the palace walls. No cake, no quiet dinner. But you're told the gods are pleased. And really, what more could a birthday boy want? You wake up in a foul mood. Not because of dreams, though last night you did have one involving a talking ibis and a suspiciously judgmental statue of Anubis, but because your left sandal broke. Again. You stare at the frayed strap dangling from your ankle. A servant rushes in with a replacement, bows low, and offers it on a small gold tray, whispering an apology so elaborate it sounds like a mini-hymn. You sigh. Because even your sandals have responsibilities. They're not just footwear, they're symbols. Symbols of kingship, of dominion, of cosmic order, of your ability to quite literally walk over chaos. No pressure, of course. In fact, the soles of your royal sandals are purposefully decorated with images of your enemies, bound, face down, sometimes labeled with specific regional names. So every step you take becomes a sacred stomp against disorder. Your morning stroll across the courtyard? That's not just exercise. It's a ritual act of spiritual conquest. Historians still debate whether the imagery was a genuine religious belief or more of a political theater. Likely both. Either way, the message is clear. Don't mess with the guy whose shoes are covered in symbolic violence. And yet, you can't help but notice the irony. You are the supposed master of Upper and Lower Egypt, chosen by the gods, and yet, you can't keep your footwear from falling apart during breakfast. A priest once told you sandals symbolize the journey through life. You didn't realize that meant they'd give you blisters. The replacement sandals arrive, freshly lacquered, detailed with images of Nubian captives, framed by lotus blossoms, and strapped with woven reeds said to have been soaked in sacred crocodile tears. You slide your foot in. The left one is tight. Of course it is. The sandal bearer asks if you'd like the Papyrus of Nine Smites motif or the bound Asiatics with Flames version for today's tour of the grain granaries. You pick the flaming one. It feels more dramatic. As you walk, scribes record each stop. You step through the Temple of Ptah, where the floor tiles are specially designed to reflect constellations. Every placement of your heel is a nod to a star. If you step on the wrong tile, it could imply you've offended Orion. The pressure is unrelenting. You long for the freedom of the palace cats. Bare-pawed, elegant, gloriously unconcerned with symbolism. Meanwhile, you're worried about whether your right sandal is scuffing the symbolic face of your own cousin, who was recently demoted and now appears beneath your foot in most official artwork. You think about changing the design, maybe flowers. Then you remember the scribes, the priests, the murals already half finished in your new temple corridor. The implications of a sandal rebranding. Better stick with enemies. Quirky note. There was actually a royal title known as Sandal Maker to the Pharaoh. This wasn't a joke. It was a prestigious position. The person who made your sandals was considered spiritually vital. If the stitching was wrong, the strap too short, the symbols out of order, it could trigger a wave of omens bad enough to cancel a harvest festival. One sandal maker, famously, added extra enemies to the heel. Just in case, he said, more smiting is never bad. You weren't sure how to feel about that, but the sandals were comfortable. You arrive at the granary. The overseer bows, then launches into a report about storage levels, weevil infestation statistics, and whether the goddess Renenutet has blessed this year's wheat yet. You nod, you listen, you shift your weight to your left foot, and immediately feel that same tightness again. You discreetly adjust your stance. The scribe notices. Later, a report will be issued titled, "The Shifting of the Pharaoh's Sandal, Portent or Posture." The temple will hold a quiet consultation. The court astrologer will be summoned. A priest will recommend an extra offering of salt, all because your sandal pinched. Being divine is exhausting. Still, you know the importance of appearances. A loose strap could symbolize weakness. A missing enemy face could mean treaty time. Your sandals say who you are, every detail calibrated to uphold divine order. Back in your chambers, you remove them gently. You notice the wear on the soles, a scuffed elbow here, a scratched eyebrow there. The symbolic faces are starting to fade. You ask for a new pair. The sandal maker nods and promises something special. Tomorrow, he says, you'll walk over enemies and walk on clouds. You're intrigued, but also a little afraid, because in Egypt, even a sandal can start a war. You sit back in your throne, well, perch, because let's be honest, this royal seat was clearly designed by someone who thought comfort was for fishermen. You stare at the latest diplomatic gift placed before you, a beautifully carved relief from the Hittites, your neighbors to the north. It's impressive, intricate, surprisingly flattering, too flattering. You narrow your eyes. The carving shows you and the Hittite king in a formal embrace, exchanging gifts beneath the approving gaze of Ra. But there's something off. You're the same height. In fact, it might even be generous to say you're a little shorter. You turn to your scribe. Did we approve this? He coughs nervously. No, radiance of the horizon. They sent it as a gift. Of course they did. Because your enemies have better artists. It's one of the hidden indignities of being Pharaoh. Even when you win, someone else might carve the story better, more vividly, with more flattering shadows and way more dramatic horses. You walk over to inspect the relief. Their king has cheekbones. You've got eyebrows, barely. The horses pulling their chariot look like they moonlight as deities. Yours appear mildly concerned. Historians still argue how much artistic competition existed between empires like Egypt and the Hittites, or the Assyrians, or even the Mitanni. But there's ample evidence that reliefs, murals, and carvings were used not just to record history, but to shape it. And when diplomacy didn't go your way, you could always commission a mural that said otherwise. You return to your own palace walls. They're covered with images of you, in heroic poses, smiting enemies, arms raised, spear midair, enemies groveling beneath your feet in perfect cement. These scenes are as accurate as a childhood drawing of a family vacation. The truth? The Hittites might have beaten you in that skirmish, or maybe it was a draw. But your official wall shows a one-sided triumph, your chariot 4 times larger than theirs, the sun god Ra literally hovering over your helmet in admiration. Because that's your right. You're Pharaoh. You control the narrative, or so you hope. Until the neighbors get involved. The Hittites send letters. We noticed your depiction of the Battle of Kadesh includes 17 chariots and a divine hawk army. Our version, enclosed here, shows a joint treaty and some fig sharing. You sigh. You did sign a treaty, eventually, but it didn't involve figs. Quirky detail. The world's oldest known peace treaty, yes, peace treaty, was between Egypt and the Hittites, after the very battle you're now staring at in competing murals. Both sides claimed victory. Both sides commissioned artists. Both versions were, technically, true. Sort of. Now, imagine living in that world, where every border negotiation, every trade agreement, every royal marriage comes with art direction. The Mitanni want their princess painted next to you? Fine, but not taller than your great wife. The Assyrians want to send a diplomatic stele? You better make sure it's stored behind your more impressive stele. Your scribes are constantly adjusting timelines, elevations, and enemy facial expressions. There's even a department dedicated to strategic flattery adjustments. One artist recently asked if it was okay to make your arms just a little longer to better cradle the falcon of justice. You said yes. And let's not forget statues. A neighboring city sends you one, in honor of our everlasting friendship. It's well carved, ornate, and shows you in a modest kneeling pose. A kneeling pose. You grind your teeth, smile politely, and order your own statue to be delivered in return. This one towers 12 feet high. He includes a cobra crown and shows the other king with arms folded awkwardly like he just forgot his laundry. It's a constant war of symbols, and your enemies are catching up. They've hired better sculptors. They're trading pigments from exotic lands. One of them, gods forbid, has learned perspective. You feel a chill, because while your artists continue carving you in profile, enemies are depicting three-quarter views and dynamic stances. There's even talk of natural shading. You're not entirely sure what that is, but it sounds suspiciously realistic. You hold an emergency council. Should we try more angles? You ask. The chief carver gasps. Blasphemy, he whispers. Pharaohs are always shown in profile. To break tradition would be unsettling. But you wonder, maybe unsettling is necessary. You commission a secret relief, just one. Slight turn of the shoulder, maybe a little flex in the knee. The gods don't strike you down. Encouraged, you ask for more lifelike eyes. The priest frowns. You back off. You spend the evening walking through your own temple hallways, past columns covered in your triumphs. You know they're curated, staged, even fictionalized, but they're yours. You may not have the best artists, but you have the most walls. And for now, that's enough. The sandals pinch a little more today. You're tired, you're sun-drenched, and there's a drafty breeze crawling through your palace corridor despite the 100-degree heat outside. A servant rushes to your side, whispering, Your Majesty, they've begun preparing the regalia for your next divine audience. You arch an eyebrow. Which gods this time? The servant hesitates. All of them. Ah, that means full ceremony. Gold collar, falcon-headed scepter, wig, and of course, the ceremonial beard. You sigh. Because you are a woman, and you still have to wear the beard. Not a cute one, either. Not something airy and subtle. It's a hefty, braided, false chin strap of legitimacy, often fastened with beeswax and hope. The traditional pharaonic beard. It curves slightly at the tip like a question mark sent by the gods. Why are you doing this again? You look in the mirror. Eyes rimmed with kohl. Crown balanced precisely atop a linen-wrapped wig. And now, the beard, tied on with blue cord and a quiet prayer that it doesn't slip during the hymn. Because heaven forbid you should look unpharaonic. Historians still debate how many women ruled Egypt outright. Hatshepsut is the most famous, reigning during the 18th dynasty as pharaoh in every sense of the word. She adopted full regalia, including masculine titles and imagery, not because she was pretending to be male, but because the role of pharaoh required certain symbols. Symbols like beards. It was never personal, it was political. To rule Egypt, you had to fit into the divine narrative. You weren't just a ruler, you were a living god-king. The gods didn't make room for queen in their annual schedule of rituals, ceremonies, and sunbarge appointments. So here you are, padding down the stone corridor with your chin glued into place, pretending you can breathe through layers of linen, lapis, and respectability. You remember your younger days, when you still signed things as Daughter of the Lotus, and nobody expected you to walk like Horus reborn. Back then, you could speak plainly, laugh out loud, even skip the headdress on hot days. Not anymore. Now every movement must signal cosmic balance. Your walk must be measured. Your speech must include metaphors about papyrus and the sacred flow of the Nile. Your public face must not only command, it must radiate sovereignty. And the beard, absurd as it feels, is part of that. Quirky fact: some depictions of Hatshepsut show her with a beard in one mural and without in another, possibly reflecting different phases of her reign. Scholars debate whether this shows political evolution or just artistic indecision. Either way, it proves one thing: symbolic facial hair is surprisingly flexible. You wonder how your artisans feel painting you with strong jawlines and broad shoulders, all while dodging the fact that your favorite drink is date wine and your handwriting is still neater than the vizier's. They paint you smiting enemies, riding chariots, building obelisks, all in masculine form. But when they kneel before you, they still call you Great Mother of the Two Lands. It's confusing, for them, for you, probably for the gods too. You once tried giving a speech as yourself, just you, no crown, no beard, no deep voice. It was during the planting festival. You said something heartfelt about the rhythm of the Nile, the strength of the farmers, the patience of women who carry both grain and empire. The priests smiled politely, then requested a second speech, this time with proper symbolism. You gave it, with the beard on. The people cheered louder. The gods apparently were pleased. You learned the lesson: image is everything. So now, when you visit temples, you perform. You stride like a conqueror. You speak like thunder. You nod wisely while secretly wondering if your eyeliner is smudging under all the ceremonial sweat. And people believe it. They don't see the girl who used to sneak into the papyrus archives and read love poems. They see the falcon of justice, daughter of Ra, the ruler who smiles sternly. You think about Hatshepsut again, about how, after her death, her successor tried to erase her name from the records, smashed her statues, recarved her temples, as if painting over her beard would undo the fact that she ruled. But she's still here, whispered in corridors, Pharaoh, shed on fragments, hidden in tombs. You're still here too, and beard or not, they'll remember you. Eventually the ceremony begins. You take your place beside the altar, surrounded by incense, flanked by leopard skin priests humming in ancient tones. The gods are watching. The people are watching. Somewhere, a scribe is already carving your image into sandstone. You tilt your chin slightly higher. The beard itches. But the throne is steady. You've done it. You've died. Well, not you, but the royal you. The divine embodiment of Horus who's now passed into the realm of Osiris, which means one thing: you're not done yet. In fact, your afterlife might be even more complicated than your life was. Death, for an Egyptian pharaoh, isn't a finish line. It's a ceremonial marathon filled with spells, gates, terrifying creatures, and at least one celestial paperwork check. The moment your heart stops beating, your embalmers get to work. Not out of grief, but because the gods are on a schedule, and mummification waits for no one. Step 1. Remove the soft bits. That means your stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver go into little jars, each with a decorative lid shaped like a protective deity. Cute in theory, slightly off-putting in practice. Your heart? That gets special treatment. It's weighed later. Your brain? Yanked out through your nose. Because apparently, pharaoh or not, your cerebral matter is considered expendable. You try not to take it personally. Quirky detail: some embalmers would replace the removed organs with linen bundles, amulets, or even onions. Why? No one knows exactly. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual symbolism or just an ancient form of packing peanuts. Eventually, your body is dried, oiled, wrapped in hundreds of feet of linen, and adorned with charms and sacred beetles. The result? A very stiff, slightly glittery version of yourself, sealed into a series of increasingly ornate boxes. Sarcophagus within sarcophagus within sarcophagus. You are the nesting doll of eternity, and then the journey truly begins. In the underworld, you're not strolling past clouds with a harp and a halo. Oh no, you're navigating a labyrinth of peril. The Duat, Egypt's realm of the dead, is a dreamlike swamp filled with fire-breathing serpents, lakes of boiling water, judgment halls, and disembodied arms that snatch at your ankles. You're given a map. It's written in spells, not directions. Spells. You must recite the Book of the Dead, hundreds of incantations, passwords, and poetic metaphors, each designed to get you past a different gatekeeper or divine customs agent. You're asked questions like, what is the secret name of the second hour of the night? You answer, the one who swallows shadows. If you're wrong, you get eaten by a crocodile-lion-hippopotamus hybrid named Amit, who exists solely to devour the unworthy. Fun. And then comes the climax of your afterlife paperwork, the weighing of the heart. Your heart is placed on one side of a golden scale, on the other, the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and balance. If your heart is heavy with sin, into Amit's mouth you go. If your heart balances with the feather, you're declared true of voice. And only then, do you pass on to the field of reeds. A peaceful, sun-drenched eternity where crops grow instantly, boats sail smoothly, and no one ever demands another temple built in your honor. You finally get to rest. Mostly. Because even in the field of reeds, there's a catch. You still need food, shelter, clothes, and servants. Which is why you were buried with all those mini statues, all those jars of preserved honey, all those symbolic shovels. Heaven, it turns out, requires inventory. Historians are still fascinated by the bureaucratic logic of the Egyptian afterlife. It's less about moral absolutes, more about order and preparation. Forget spontane, use redemption. The ancient gods wanted receipts. You lie entombed, wrapped, sealed, and painted. Outside, your temple hums with priests reciting your name. As long as someone remembers you, as long as someone utters your titles, you remain alive in the afterlife. Which is why your final legacy matters. The art, the scrolls, the stories carved into stone, all designed to keep you here. But the sands shift, empires crumble, your name fades. The priests stop coming. The last festival is held in your honor. And then, silence. Until one day, a group of foreign men in wide hats and dusty boots arrive. They dig. They uncover. They open your tomb. And they say your name again. Clumsily. But still. A spark of remembrance. A new afterlife. This time, not as Pharaoh, but as mystery, as myth, as museum exhibit. You live again, just not the way you expected. Word count, 1,281. Wind down begins below. So we've followed you, haven't we? From the searing sun of the Nile to the shadows of eternity. We watched as you walked gilded hallways in sandals that symbolized cosmic order, endured ceremonies until your knees locked, wore beards that didn't match your face but did match the divine script, and finally, stepped into the silence beyond the tomb. And now, as the last echoes of sandal steps fade, and the golden light dims behind those stone doors, we let you go. The rituals are over, the offerings placed, the gods satisfied, for now. Your story, Pharaoh, is one of contradiction, revered but restricted, worshipped but watched, immortalized yet buried under centuries of shifting sand. But here, in the quiet hum of sleep, we keep your name alive a little longer. so close your eyes. Imagine the cool air inside your hidden chamber, the flickering torchlight glinting off painted walls, the scent of myrrh, the hush of eternity settling in like a soft blanket of linen. You're safe. You've done enough. And whether as ruler or mummy, myth or memory, you are remembered. Sweet dreams, Eternal One.